Real Tech Talk episode 19. As I was saying, this is the first time your boy EB nervous. I'm nervous because the guy I'm having on it is a freaking pioneer, dude. When you and I were still building buildings and thinking technology had nothing to do with real estate, this guy was changing the universe. He literally changed a sector of how you perceive real estate. It's called common. It's called co-living. He created a new subject matter that wasn't even on there. WeWork did it in office. You're seeing certain, Uber was doing it with taxis. The dude here was the one who got into that space when you and I weren't even thinking about it. We got him on here. We got a half hour, 35 minutes, depending on how we cut it, to listen to him. Sit down, pay attention, because my man Brad Hargreaves from Common is here today. Pay attention to what he says. I brought him in for you. You need to listen. Oh, and by the way, everyone seems to be watching this show. You have to hit the button to like and subscribe, people. Like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
That's why we're here, bro. This is Real Tech Talk. Boom shakalaka. So who the hell are you, bro? You know, what are you into? What do you do? Dude, you can keep it real here. Tell me about these real estate players.
Eric Brody is the managing principal of CEMVC LLC. All opinions expressed by Eric and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of CEMVC LLC. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Clients of CEMVC LLC may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
Welcome back. Real Tech Talk, episode number 19. I want to tell you, I've done 19 of these bad boys, and I'll tell you, the only one I'm going to be nervous to interview is this man, and you might not know him. You might have seen him in the paper, but he's only here live. Actually, it won't be live. Whatever. Sort of live. On Real Tech Talk, Brad Hargreaves. Have you heard of this man? This man got into technology when it was a nascent industry, is one of the guys who actually created a successful business. Actually, two of them. We'll let him talk about it briefly. I am going to grill him about the future of PropTech, real estate, and what you don't even know is his insights, how smart he is. And then there's something called a mensch. I ask this man all the time to hook me up. Within seconds, he does it. Now, he's big time, and he still makes time for you. No wonder he's as successful as he's been. B-Rad, thank you for coming on, man. You're the man. I really appreciate you.
Super happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So tell me, people want to know, how did you know? How did you read the tea leaves about technology? And just give them a quick background of what you did in this space. I'm going to hit you up about the future. But how did you know, man?
Look, got to start. I started building games. You know, that's how I got started in
technology. I don't know. That's why we're here.
Games. I was building games when I was a little kid.
Where'd you grow up?
Grew up in Arkansas. There's nothing else to do other than build games, so that's what I did. And
or meth, no, or fentanyl.
You can do two things: you can code or you can do meth. And so, you know, I think I made the right choice there. And or you can code and do meth, and then you write some really weird code. So I started actually running a game development studio.
How old were you when you were like, I was obsessed with computers?
I probably 5th, 6th grade.
Wow.
And started,
and it's not like it's a tech hub. You were alone, no?
No, I was alone, but being alone, you learn things, and picked up those skills, and started my first game development company back in 2008, and 2006, and that got me into technology, and that eventually got me into the real estate world.
Yeah, no, that was a big jump.
We'll talk about that.
So let's talk about the game first. What game did you choose? What was it?
Yeah, so we built actually massively multiplayer casual online games. So this was back when everyone built in Flash. And I don't know if you remember Flash, like Flash games, like E-Bombs World and that kind of stuff. So we said, let's make...
So not Leisure Suit Larry or...
some similarities. So we built... we had this idea that we were going to democratize sports. Mm-hmm. So we built casual multiplayer games that anyone could play and that you played as part of a team. And we would run tournaments based on rivalry. So we would do...
So it was still cloud-based? Like, how did you even know...
So it's a web-based games. So,
which was huge at the time. That wasn't
2006.
Wow.
So this is pre-iPhone, pre-iOS, pre-Facebook.
Did you capitalize on it? Did you actually make money, and that's how, like, you got out of there?
Yeah. So
how'd you get out?
how'd we get out?
Of Arkansas, yeah. How'd you get out?
Oh, well, I started building those games. I was in college when I when I did that. I went to school up here in the Northeast, and recruited a few friends to start this studio with me, and happy to talk about how I got out of Arkansas too. It's a totally different story, but yeah, it was building games, and some of them got pretty popular. So we'd run like the SEC tournament, Big 10, Big 12, get all the schools playing each other. Would get 10, 20,000 students in these tournaments. And that, ultimately we've never found a real way to make money from these tournaments.
Which is a whole other thing, right? Like you can have some incredible tech and just not figure it out, right?
Absolutely. So a lot of lessons learned there. I was, probably 19, 20 when I started the company, and probably 23 when 2008, 2009 hit and sunk us.
Yeah.
So it was a wild ride. It was an experience.
So now, boom, now you're like, I know there's something out there, but how would you then think to attack real estate? Like, I always want to know, because now really interesting is we're learning from people where they're coming from. Some are subcontractors' kids, some were GCs' kids. And you came in out of nowhere from the tech side. So how did you then say, F it, I want to change real estate or even get involved?
Well, there was a step in the middle where I started a company called General Assembly with a couple friends. And that really arose pretty organically from being in the tech ecosystem in New York. It was very nascent back in 2009. It's not what it is today.
I was speaking with one of the principals of one of the largest PropTech venture funds, of which you introduced me to, but I just don't want to name them. And he was like, we started this business in 08. That was this thing. I'm the first. So you were right there. 08, 09 was the beginning of what you and I would call property technology.
Right. And, but at the same time, you didn't have the ubiquity of skills that you have today. I mean, very few people knew how to code. It was not it was hard to get into unless you had been like me and you were coding for a lot of your life and you were in the tech world. It's not obvious how do you get into coding into tech, period.
It's all self-learned, self-taught at that point.
It's all self-taught. So at the time, this was during the downturn. A lot of people were losing their jobs. People I had gone to school with, friends of mine who had their job offers pulled. They were, they'd done everything they were asked to do. And now suddenly they're in New York. They're in the job market and they're struggling. They're lost.
By the way, I just saw the Bernie Madoff doc in like 08. Like he somehow scathed through at that time. So I just remembered how terrible it was.
It was a rough time.
It was a rough time.
It was a really rough time. And it felt very different than today.
Yeah.
Where, today we're at 3.5% unemployment. Housing is getting rocked. There's certain sectors that are getting hit. There are layoffs in tech, but fundamentally the economy is sound. 2008 felt like the bottom fell out. And started looking at this question of how do people get into tech, and you have this pool of people on one hand who are driven, have motivation, but they don't have the skills. On the other hand, you have all these jobs, in tech, people growing, starting tech companies, an opportunity there. So started a community hub down on 20th and Broadway. It had some event space, it had some working space, but most importantly, it had classroom space. We started teaching people tech skills.
Oh, shit.
Initially, it was
That's General Assembly, by the way?
That's General Assembly.
So it was almost, it turned out, I guess, to incubate certain things, but it was a model of like how to teach tech.
It became, initially it was a lot of things kind of brought together, but it became the largest technology school in the United States.
Really?
So we built that.
Not that I heard about it because I was knee deep, balls deep in real estate, wasn't even paying attention. I wish I did.
Well, it's, we got to a point where we're doing about 20, 30,000 students a year.
Wow.
Were
you a professor, Hargreaves, or were you still Brad?
I tried to avoid teaching. It was, we got mostly teaching initially technology, pure play technology. So JavaScript, user experience design, things like that. Really, and we set a standard of, we want to teach people not just so they pick up some skills they can use on the weekend, but to a point that they could get a job. And we religiously measured, and we were the first to get, third-party audits of, our job placement stats and
give me a highlight out of there. Who came out of there? Who's a graduate of General Assembly that's done something that we would all know?
Well, tens of thousands of people who work at technology companies, who work at agencies, who work.
But none of them became like
companies.
I don't know.
It's
Not the Google guys were. I'm just saying.
It's possible they did, but we very intentionally set the company up to not focus on that. It wasn't about the one person who became a rock star.
No, that was for vanity. That was just for me. That wasn't for.
And it's totally possible. We have some of those. I haven't been day to day there in a number of years, but we really cared about 97% of our students within 6 months of graduation. They're in a job in that field. It's not about one person becomes a total rock star.
Yep.
It's about the consistency. It is
very
about
cool.
Every class, every instructor, every cohort, they get their outcomes they're looking for.
That's fresh. And I totally understand. But again, now you're balls deep in technology.
Yeah.
So but tell me then, how does it go to, how do you pull in this real estate with your next idea? Because now that one's successful. You told me about that. You exited. It was amazing, right? Life is good. Then why? Why real estate now? Where did that come from?
Yeah, totally. So it arose very organically from seeing the needs of our students at General Assembly.
What were their needs? What was the problem?
They need a place to live. If you are new to New York, San Francisco, DC, we, for many reasons, built our campuses. We built our schools in places that people wanted to be, in these urban hubs. We called them urban campuses.
I understand now.
Well, if that's what you're doing, then suddenly your student's biggest problem.
Where to live?
Where do you live?
Yeah, how do I get to class?
And we were finding that so many of our students were not looking for a apartment. They weren't going out looking for a studio or a one bedroom. They were looking for a room. They'd go to Craigslist and they would say, where do I live?
Yeah.
And who has a free room, or a room to rent for $1,000, $1,200 a month, because that's what they could afford. Particularly in
what
the
year is this, by the way?
This is 2015.
And there's no one else thinking this way at that point, right? Are you the first?
There were other people who were looking at innovation in technology. Chris Bledsoe at Ollie had been working on how do you redesign spaces to serve, roommates, to drive affordability. You had other folks that were creating more, I would call them intentional communities, like hacker houses and things like that.
Right, but you were thinking, how do I get these kids in a room so they get here in the morning?
Yeah, it was very utilitarian. It was very much like, hey, there is a large population of people who are moving to the city, maybe for a class, maybe for their first job, maybe for their second job.
And by the way, for those who don't know who we're talking to here, that company is called Common. And not only that, in the paper, as we were discussing, they just linked up with the largest co-living in Europe to create the largest, right? The biggest in the universe. Well, we don't know the universe, but at least on Earth, co-living out there. So we have in our midst the guy who basically succeeded in that space right here being interviewed. And that's where it came from, college.
The lizard people on Andromeda are definitely co-living. So I don't know. I don't know about the universe. But, certainly on this planet.
So then, so now you knew there was this need. You knew there was a need. You're like, these kids got to get to class. So then how did you then structure it? What was it like? So great. So now what?
Well, I faced this problem of I didn't know anything about real estate.
Right.
And we had signed leases for General Assembly. That's how we grew, is we would go into office buildings and, we would explain, hey, we want to, change your CFO so we can run a school here. So I knew a little bit about it. But, there's more fundamental questions when you are saying, hey, we are going to build a residential building that looks different than other residential buildings.
Agreed.
You're laid out in a different way.
You're in this straight up real estate, ROI,
absolutely.
Tech. We got a problem. These kids got to come to class.
Absolutely.
How did you solve this bumping of heads of people who don't get it?
Yeah. So, initially it was really about, we said, hey, we're going to start small. We're going to start with something that's small that we can get out there and just validate the unit economics so that we can put, if the building is laid out correctly, we can drive rent lower and generate higher NOI per square foot.
Yeah, but you didn't do an NB from the beginning, right? You didn't do a new building. Was that the
No,
first
so
one?
we actually so we scoured and we found this vacant small condo project in Brooklyn. And the great thing about it is, there was nobody living there, but the units were laid out in such a way where each unit could be converted into 5 bedrooms.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we could do that legally and with permits. And that was really important to us because
Sure.
no, it was.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
And it's a real challenge because sometimes you have to compete with people who don't do that. But everything, we had aspirations to scale and go into multiple cities. So we wanted everything.
But how did you get the money to buy it? Are you saying you capitalized it?
No, we partnered actually with a local real estate developer and investor.
Who was willing to take the risk on that vision. So that person, which is interesting, they're small.
Yes.
Right? You said a small project. Now it's massive, but at the time you had to go small with the visionary because that person is way ahead of their time.
So the person we partnered with is Ben Typen from Quantiera, who understands technology. He also understands real estate. So there's a handful of people out there, and in 2015 that was extremely rare.
Extremely. Even today, when I speak to people, they think that I'm rare, and I'm like, "Don't you see the writing on the wall? I read the books."
It's a so we partnered with Ben, and he really put kind of the, when we raised a small amount of money around kind of his GP to take that building. I mean, I think we bought it for like $4 million or something. It was not, it was not a tremendous acquisition, but it proved out the concept.
So that's interesting, just for our viewers. So you purchased it. It wasn't cash. You borrowed the money.
So we put together a syndicate with Ben to buy the building.
So you buy it all cash, right? Reason I'm saying that is
correct.
I'm finding, and you're probably finding, that banks don't like underwriting Airbnb, don't like underwriting co-living. They want it to be whatever the market is, and then if you're making more, fantastic, but we're not giving you debt based on that theory.
Right. So it was, we bought it vacant, very low leverage, and then we master leased it from the syndicate. So there was a couple layers.
Right. So the master lease is mitigating the risk of that acquisition. And you're like, fine, that master leaseor is actually going to take the risk on what's going to now happen.
So for our first 10, 15 assets, we did master leases. And that was kind of 2015, 2016, 2017.
So tell me, though, what happened? So you do the work.
Right.
You make it into this 5-bedroom, right?
And well, so it was 4 units of 5 bedrooms each. So it went from a 4-unit vacant condo building to a
20-bed building.
19-bed co-living asset. We built out, a nice community space downstairs.
But really, just so that we kind of understand, it's like, so we chop up this unit, but then we leave a space where you guys can come together.
Absolutely.
Basically, right? So
it was laid out well for that.
Right.
And,
but that's what it meant to you at the time. Right? That's not a tech play yet, right? That's a solution for the issue that you have at class. But did you then, which is amazing, and obviously it was successful and you got to do it again. What was the layer, or where do you see the layers of technology now?
Yeah, so there's a couple of places where technology is key. The first is to be able to do that leasing in a way that is acceptable to the end user, but is also legally viable. So what the user wants, what the customer wants, is they want to come and they want to rent a room. They want to come and they want to say, hey, I'm staying from October 1st to March 1st, and I want to rent that room for that period of time. Now, the challenge is, how do you get 4 other people to join on
How about
that?
trust? Like, who are these freaks, right? Who knows?
So there's trust, and there's ways to address that, but just the legal question of how do you get them all onto a lease together, there's some technology solutions that actually make that easier, that make the experience good for the renter, and the end result is that we have a legally compliant lease. So there's some challenges there and some technology solutions to that.
So what's fascinating, and I think the audience doesn't realize, is people think tech and they think like an AI drone robot, right? And you're like, no, the real estate concept you get, you're like, we need to put these kids into a room. That's construction. That's not, obvious legal compliance. It's construction.
Yeah.
You could have done what you did and not say it's tech yet.
Yeah.
Then it's like, no, the technology was how we actually can like go to, again, a cloud-based software to find the humans to occupy the spaces, because next you tell me I'd be on the street giving out flyers for rooms.
Right. Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
That was the tech, right?
And then there's a lot as we got into it and started doing larger assets, and we expanded at a point beyond co-living, and we're running 200, 300 unit buildings for larger investors, larger owners. We saw a lot of opportunities to improve the leasing process, to make that more efficient, to centralize more operations that had historically been done on site, move those into central back offices, lower operating costs.
And that's when this business when was it just like you? So now it worked. Then what happened? Who came to you and said?
So in some ways, the pandemic was, even though it was tough for co-living writ large, it was great for Common, because it forced us, suddenly nobody was lending against co-living. Nobody was building co-living in March of 2020. There were big existential questions, and the industry ended up recovering and doing fine. But there are big existential questions, and that got us thinking about, well, what do we have? What are we doing? And how are we doing it that adds value beyond just roommates? And this centralization of operations, the technology behind it, was adding a lot of value to the buildings we were managing. So we weren't having a whole leasing team on site. We were doing a lot of virtual tours. That really helped us accelerate through the pandemic, and ended up doing a lot of management and working with a lot of companies that weren't doing co-living at all. We started a workforce housing business. We started a family-oriented housing brand. And that became a huge accelerant.
Well, you proved the concept that you could design for something that was different than listening to the brokerage community saying 1s, 2s, 3s do well here.
Right.
You came in with a concept. And tell me where it's at today. And then I want to get into some of my conspiracy theories that I want you to hit on. Because I think that the timing was incredible. I think that the idea and the concept isn't so far from what many people saw. You just acted on it, and it worked. I think that's just like a fascinating story, because as you and I see, PropTech is getting rocked on the transaction side of the people who did it, right? There's a lot of people who are like, or look at WeWork and are just shitting on that technology. They're like, well, it doesn't really work, right? And I'll get into my conspiracy theory, but you came up with one that has fundamentally changed the way in which you can underwrite an asset. Yeah. And it'll never go back. I'm sorry. You have to pay attention to what this man did in the universe of real estate, and then we'll get into my conspiracy theory in a second. We'll get back to it. But where did it wind up? So where did Common go?
Yeah, so it's actually in the news this week that we merged with the largest co-living operator outside the United States to create by far the world leader in shared housing. So it's about 30,000 units, 40 cities, 14 countries, and it makes sense for both sides. It makes a lot of sense for them. They don't have a North American operation. It makes a lot of sense for us, and that scale is a huge, I mentioned centralized operations. If you have centralized operations, they really benefit from added scale. And obviously the capital markets right now are really favoring profitability, and profitability benefits from scale. So there's a lot going into making this make sense, and consolidation being a theme that you've seen in co-living. I think a couple of companies had not great outcomes.
Right.
Now this is really about acceleration, and we're really excited to see where it goes from here.
And then what did you decide?
So I'm still going to be a part of it. I'm still going to be very much.
But it was in the paper that you were like, I'm going to start. It's time to go start my next big thing, right?
So we'll see where it goes from here. I've been really enjoying writing started a newsletter.
Right, but you did step away now, right? You were like, all right, cool. C'est la vie. Keep doing my thing. And I know you're still a part of it, but you're like, all right, I got other things to now look at, right? That's your second time you've done something fucking tremendous, no?
Look, I'm still an advisor. I'm still really close to that team and the people executing. I did step away from the CEO seat about 6 months ago. Brought in a really tremendous executive from the hospitality world, 30 years of experience building hospitality brands.
So I think that's pretty interesting, because it's like, you are the doer of the universe. You are the entrepreneur. Eventually you're like, I made such a monster. I don't want to run and be like at the top of the monster. My gift was making the monster, and then someone else can like do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think necessarily the CEO on day one is the same right CEO 7.5 years in when you're scaling the business, and it's about client service, it's about operations, it's about scaling the team.
I guess my point is I'm running a business now that I hope one day I'm like, all right, peace. Let that person who knows how to run the billions of dollars do it. Like, I'm good. Thank you very much, you know?
Totally.
So that's amazing. So please do tell everyone what you're doing. I do get this newsletter, which is like fascinating. And then I want to get into my conspiracy theory that, by the way, came from a meeting I had before you, the meeting I had with you, and the meetings I've had after. And I want to hear your opinion on it. All right?
Yeah.
So what are you into now?
Yeah. So I launched a letter series called Thesis Driven, and it's called Thesis Driven because so much of the narrative in real estate revolves around individual deals, and deals are obviously important, but they're really indicative of an underlying theme or thesis. And so every week we tackle a different real estate thesis. We've done office to residential conversions, we've done ADUs, we've done OpCo-PropCo deals, and we do that by really profiling a handful of GPs, of developers that are executing on those themes. And
I can't wait till you profile me.
Going deep. Let me know. I'm ready.
And by the way, I just want you to know I read it. It gives me tons of ideas, and it's on Substack, right? So like, you should all be paying attention, and we don't have enough audience that now will be paying attention. But let me tell you what he just said. If you're in the game and you're trying to understand cutting edge, like, you read the paper, it's like 2 weeks behind. You read this. We're talking about we now have the brain of someone who is capable of doing these things, bumping out sort of what I think are absolutely fascinating stories about real estate that's happening in this moment. Yeah. And they give me ideas in my business in the moment. I'm not going to give away like what I'm on right now, but when I read them, they help me daily or weekly. I think you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, all right. So here's my conspiracy theory, and then we'll let you go, and then I've sucked enough out of you. Here's my conspiracy theory, and I'm not going to name any names. I go meet with one of the biggest developers, landowners in like the world, okay? And I'm not even going to whatever. And they go, yes, we have a venture capital fund, okay? And they show me, and the first slide they put up, they go, every 18 years is a real estate cycle. And you know why we're so successful? I go, why are you so successful? They go, because we're risk averse, okay? We're risk averse. I'm like, cool, that makes sense. Next one is, but we do venture capital. We have this venture capital fund. I'm like, all right, we've now funded 44 companies. That's interesting, cool. How many do you think we've implemented? 2. Access control and what you pioneered, a tenant-facing application. Okay, like you're like, what? That's like so 2017 of you. I'm like, what about the other 42? Nah, not that interested. Boom, put it aside. Next. Friend of mine creates this algo based on buy signals, multifamily outside of New York. Mm-hmm. Getting these indicators. Does it work? Doesn't it work? Who knows? Gets bought almost to be silenced by another monster company. Let's call that the head of the comet. And I'm in the long tail. And the head of the comet is the top 20, the big dogs, right? And he goes, we got bought, and they use it internally now. So again, not going to the long tail. Next is we read about these massive, your friend that you introduced me, 2 of them, massive fundraising in the PropTech sector. You read their documents and they say, we raised from the largest real estate LPs in the United States. We have 20 million square feet to scale your technology. Again, the head of the comet. Nothing to do with everyone else. Then finally, I meet the last one, and I'm like, oh, if I give you a company because I meet all these fabulous people, can I now come and meet some of your LPs? No, you're not an investor. We are closed. We will never let you in. So my conspiracy theory is that in the long tail, in the mid-market, anywhere else, they can't pay attention to technology. The biggest companies can, but they're really almost like buying to keep them off the table for their own advantage. What do you think?
So I think you're onto something. I think I want to look at this actually from the entrepreneur's point of view, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs screw this up. And they see the big real estate brand, the big behemoth, wanting to make a strategic investment. And they say, ooh, goody, goody. This is the door that's opening. This is my unlock. But as you said, 2 of 44 they actually implemented. And I believe that. That seems like, from my experience and other companies I've looked at, about the right rate. But let's think about those other 42. It's public that big real estate behemoth invested in them. And when they go to pitch other clients, the first thing those clients are going to ask and wonder is, well, my competitor is an investor in you, and they decided not to implement you. Why is that? Something must be wrong here. And so those other 42 are now have a much steeper hill to climb. And this is a version of signaling risk. And a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, don't think about it in the right way and get too excited by a big behemoth coming in and investing without a commitment to implement. And remember that the people making the decisions to make small venture investments are often very different than the people who are making implementation decisions.
Agreed.
And they often have no influence, very little influence, if not outright resentment in some cases, by the operators, by the people, by the investors, by the people who are actually making those decisions. Whereas I do encourage entrepreneurs to actually go after the middle, I don't know if I've called it the middle tail, groups that don't necessarily have big brands, but still have tremendous scale. I mean,
tremendous.
An owner with, 10,000 units.
You'd never hear of him, right? He's some dude,
plenty,
person. Like, it's crazy.
One of the things that blew my mind at Common is, 5-6 years in to the New York real estate community, to building co-living with a pretty big footprint, I would still meet owners who have 10,000 units. It's like, I've never heard of you.
Never heard of you.
It still happens.
And they still willing to fund and still are interested, right?
Absolutely. And in some respects, they have more interest and more enthusiasm and are more eager because they don't see as many opportunities.
Listen, not as a pitch for Annex than what we've done, but we were just that, right? These people would go to the big dogs, get the money from them. They're like, we still need you. And you were wondering why. Yeah. You can have a conversation about what you're the actual user. You're the actual Neanderthal that's supposed to actually use it instead of the ivory tower philosophy. So I'm glad that it's true. And I think it's amazing that you identified that, early on. I just keep seeing it. And I'm just wondering, like, they raise all this money, but I'm like, I'm not sure that's the strategy you need. Like, you got to be careful, Yeah. So let me ask you, and this is just kind of like as a wrap up. So if someone's getting into this real estate technology or construction technology space, what's most fascinating to you in 2023 that they should pay attention to? What are some of the topics that you're like, wow, these are the things that I would attack?
Yeah. So, I think there are a couple of big opportunities that do, that are emerging right now that do justify venture investment. And then there are a lot of point solutions. And the challenge is you see a lot of those point solutions out there, and maybe in some world they could be a nice cash flow business, a nice lifestyle business, but inevitably they've raised venture dollars. So that's probably off the table for most of them. But the big opportunities, I think there's a few categories. One is, are there ways to take on the big property management systems, the Yardis, the Entradas, the Real Pages, et cetera? I mean,
I read an article recently, and I make this example all the time. What bank do you use? I spoke at Baruch. It's like, we use Chase or, I'm not even sorry to say them, but whoever, another bank. And you're like, why? And they're like, oh, we have big accounts. I'm like, you don't have big accounts. Yeah. I'm like, they're mobile first technology. You like it. Yeah. Right? And it's like Yardi. It's like for them to change their architecture so you and I want to use it, it's a huge opportunity.
Totally.
It's like using it is like brain damage, right? So it's like, there's one. I like that one.
I think there's an opportunity. And look, I mean, we're customers of Entrada. We enjoy Entrada, but they just raised $500 million from Silver Lake. So they're well on the journey. So I think there's still opportunities there to create better property management solutions. I also look at the opportunity in, listing sites. There's, you're still looking at apartments.com and Zillow. And I think there is a great opportunity for a new generation, of consumer-facing discovery sites.
Yeah, and then that flows into like how you present it, right? There's tons of those applications.
There's a lot
What's
of those.
The best way to like that you and I want to experience walking through it virtually or experiencing it virtually so that we can rent it? That's cool.
And then the third category I'll mention, and I did a thesis-driven deep dive on this a few weeks ago, are data-driven tools that help developers and investors more easily evaluate sites. And the holy grail here is, does it unlock small multifamily strategies for larger institutional investors? So you've seen single family, become a major institutional, asset class and with a ton of interest. Obviously, large scale multifamily, 250 units and up, that's been going for a while. But this kind of middle ground of like everything from fourplexes all the way up to 50 unit buildings is still very much in mom and pop land. And, the challenge is there's way more variables there than there is with a single family home. But that's actually great use of technology, is can you systematize and reduce the number of variables to allow a GP to more effectively screen investment opportunities and unlock those opportunities for larger LPs.
I assume many people are trying to do it in-house, which goes into all this other how you structure and whatever, and what's the way in which to solve that and who do you sell it to and the rest of it,
Some really interesting quant GPs that are doing well, like 2 Sigma here in New York. You've got Stablewood in Texas that are using, more data-driven methodologies. You
got Annex.
You got
doing the same thing or building the same thing. So I hear you.
So you've got some good groups out there that are doing good data-driven work.
That's awesome. So listen, I really appreciate your time. If you're not watching this podcast and getting a half hour, 35 minutes of this dude's brain, I'm not sure what you're doing with your time, but you really don't understand like how important it is and how special it is to have you here. So like, I'm really grateful. Thank you so much. And keep introducing me to everyone and making me smarter than I really am and how I look. So I really thank you, B.
Any day. Thanks for having me.
All right, brother, man. We flipped the script this time. This was just a straight up interview with a tech celeb. We're talking to Brad Hargreaves. You just heard it. He's the man. He knows what he's talking about. He changed the categories of the game. He isn't asking me to invest. It's not happening. This isn't your normal Annex Ventures tech talk. This is that new shit. You got to keep it sexy. You got to keep it moving. We will have more technologists on it, but sometimes we get masters of the universe. And since this is my platform, Real Tech Talk with who? Eric Brody, I'm bringing him on if he wants to come on. So this is amazing. This is a hybrid. Sit down, pay attention, listen. That was fresh. I can't wait till this bad boy comes out. So I'll see you soon. We're going to keep blowing this bad boy up. Oh, and by the way, stop watching and not subscribing. Like, what do you think this is? You need to hit the subscribe button. We need you on it, people. That way, by the way, I may be able to send you stuff. I don't know what's going to happen, but I want to see you subscribe. Again, Common, Co-Living, my boy Brad Hargreaves on the mic this week. Pay attention.